The year is 2005, and the United States is about to get hit with an influx of frozen yogurt establishments that, despite the recession, managed to become a multi-billion-dollar industry. And yet, by 2020, frozen yogurt production in the US would return to pre-2006 levels. So what happened? How did frozen yogurt go from being on every corner to just kind of fading into the background? This is the story of the rise and fall of the frozen yogurt industry. People have been eating regular non-frozen yogurt for thousands of years, but Massachusetts-based company Hood is credited with first serving it frozen in the 1970s. It grew in popularity and spread across the country, with chains like Everything Yogurt and TCBY popping up in New York and Arkansas, respectively. There was this frozen yogurt boom in the 80s that was closely tied to the dieting and fitness craze, because frozen yogurt was seen as a healthy alternative to ice cream. And initially, that was mostly accurate. Yogurt is naturally more tart than ice cream, and the fact that it had live cultures in it sounded good for gut health. At first, you'd see a lot of fruit flavors, but eventually that morphed into flavors like Oreo and cake batter, but we'll talk about that later. Momentum died down in the mid to late 90s, and the frozen yogurt scene was relatively quiet. That is, until 2005. In January 2005, Shelley Huang and Young Lee opened a little frozen yogurt place in West Hollywood called Pinkberry. And for all intents and purposes, we can credit Pinkberry with kicking off the frozen yogurt craze of the late 2000s. People were coming from all over LA to eat at this place that apparently wasn't all that bad for you. It also didn't hurt that a ton of celebrities were spotted with Pinkberry. And as they opened more and more locations, their popularity continued to skyrocket. So naturally, competitors started to pop up, at first mostly in Southern California. In 2006, we got Yogurtland, and then in 2007, there was Menchie's, and in 2008, there was Tutti Frutti. And that brings us to what I'm going to call the golden age of frozen yogurt, this roughly 6-year period between 2009 and 2015. If you were a teenager anytime during this era, you know that frozen yogurt places had a chokehold on our social lives. So what the heck was going on in 2009 and 2010 that specifically led to this boom? Well, first of all, the craze spread outside of California and took off nationwide. Places like 16 Handles and Yogurtland helped popularize the self-serve machines and toppings bar. And instead of just serving plain or fruit-flavored yogurt, places introduced those flavors that we talked about earlier, like Oreo, birthday cake, chocolate, cookie dough. In order to go mainstream, the industry kind of had to depart from its original focus on health. This boom also coincided perfectly with the rise of social media. All these places had super bright colored interiors, and the yogurt swirls and toppings were really visually appealing. Twitter launched in 2006 and Instagram launched in 2010, so there was this kind of built-in marketing for these really photogenic locations. On top of that, private equity firms were pouring money into these businesses. So between 2009 and 2015, the number of froyo spots in the US literally doubled, up to nearly 3,000 in the US alone. In order to relive some of the nostalgia, I made a little trip to a landmark in frozen yogurt history. I'm here outside of Richmond, Virginia, at what was the first Sweet Frog location in the entire world. Now it is an insurance doctor. I don't even know what that means. So this was the first of what would go on to become over 350 locations. Since this one's closed down, I'm gonna go to one that's like half a mile from here. For those of us on the East Coast, Sweet Frog was the biggest player in the froyo game. I feel like it was the name brand that best embodied the golden age of froyo, and everyone else felt like a wannabe competitor. As I was eating it, I was reminded that one of their biggest tricks is how quickly your bowl fills up. It doesn't feel like that much, and then all of a sudden it's way more than you can eat. Classic case of my eyes being bigger than my stomach. One anecdote that I think perfectly exemplifies the froyo boom reaching its tipping point was when 2 frozen yogurt places opened literally 12 feet apart on Carey Street in Richmond in 2012. One was a Sweet Frog, and the other was called Yapple Yogurt. At that point, it was pretty clear, like, guys, we all know this isn't gonna last. Anyways, for those of us who lived through the frozen yogurt boom of the early 2010s, it felt like a defining shared cultural experience. Much like soda fountains in the 1950s, or Dunkin' in Boston. It felt like there was one on every corner, and that's where we went. But the question still remains, what happened? Like, why did so many of these frozen yogurt chains fail? I've been able to find a few answers in my research, and it's actually almost scary how much information you can access online, and that's why I'm thankful to partner with Aura, who's the sponsor of this episode. I recently discovered that Googling myself online brings up a surprising amount of personal information, and that makes me super uncomfortable. Apparently, these data brokers will sell your information to spam callers, scammers who are trying to access your finances, and pretty much anybody else who requests it. Fortunately, Aura identifies which data brokers are selling your information. They found mine on 25 different sites, like sites I've never even heard of, and they automatically submit opt-out requests to have that information taken down. AT&T recently had a huge data leak where 73 million records from current and former customers were released on the dark web. Their recommendation was to do all these different things that would normally require several different services. But Aura actually does all of that, all in one place. So even in the event of a data leak, I don't have to worry because Aura is always on, always doing the hard work of keeping me safe. I value my privacy, and I value yours. And you can go to aura.com/samreid or click the link below to start your 2-week free trial. That's aura.com/samreid or scan this QR code to start your 2-week free trial. So what happened? Like, why did all these chains fail? And I'm going to break that information into 4 main factors as to why the frozen yogurt bubble burst. The first 2 reasons are tied together. Number 1 would be overexpansion. Pinkberry, for example, admitted in hindsight that they opened locations in markets that almost definitely didn't have a high enough density to support them. You open too many stores that aren't bringing in the revenue you thought they would, and obviously that's going to be bad news for business. It feels like they flew a little bit too close to the sun. And then the second factor is that the market was oversaturated. This is super fascinating to me, but some businesses like car dealerships and clothing stores actually benefit from being physically close to their competitors. But that's not the case with frozen yogurt. Pinkberry actually tried to fight against the oversaturation. They had these bright colors and this pretty distinctive theming, and they ended up serving at least 6 different lawsuits to froyo chains for copying their branding. But it wasn't enough in the end to balance out the overpopulation. There's this CNBC article from 2013 about froyo that has some really funny quotes in it where people are like, there's plenty of room to grow in the frozen yogurt space. Turns out, not entirely accurate. Okay, factor number 3 is that, surprise, it wasn't actually all that healthy. Frozen yogurt might be lower in fat and calories than ice cream, but it has just as much, if not more, sugar. It was also easy for people to grow skeptical of the health claims when you're literally topping up your frozen yogurt with straight up candy. Pinkberry and others ended up getting challenged in court on whether their froyo contained the probiotics and active cultures that they claimed it did. And factor number 4 is that the demand just went down. Food trends often follow diet trends, and around 2015 there was a much bigger emphasis on going dairy-free. And there was also a rise in alternative options, like people who wanted specialty desserts now had easier access to dairy-free and vegan ice creams in grocery stores. One commenter on a YouTube video said the decline was because no one goes on dates anymore, which I feel like there might be some truth to that. These places were hot spots for dates. A couple other contributing factors included rising prices. Like at the time I filmed this, the cost was 79 cents per ounce at Sweet Frog, which comes out to $12.64 per pound. For comparison, Yogurtland charged 30 cents per ounce when it first opened in 2006, and Tutti Frutti was 35 cents an ounce when it opened in 2008. In total, my frozen yogurt came out to be over $7, which is more expensive than just getting an ice cream cone in most places. Another thing that may have played a small role in the decline is that some of the big names in frozen yogurt got some strangely similar bad press. In 2014, the co-founder of Pinkberry was sentenced to jail for assaulting a homeless person. And in 2019, the founder of Sweet Frog was convicted of domestic battery. Big yikes there. So the combined effect of all these factors was the sad decline of the golden age of frozen yogurt. In 2013, the top 10 froyo chains in the world had a combined 4,482 locations, but by the end of 2022, that number had fallen to just 1,902. So less than half of what it was at its former glory. Between 2014 and 2018, Pinkberry closed 74 of its locations and ended up selling to Kahala Brands during that time. As a side note, Kahala Brands, who also owns Cold Stone Creamery, ended up getting bought by MTY Food Group in Canada. And you're never going to believe this, but MTY also ended up buying Sweet Frog in the fall of 2018. COVID was the final nail in the coffin for a lot of these places that were already on their last leg, since the business model was centered around, customers touching a handle and sharing spoons and getting close to other people's food.
I want you to live forever underneath the sky so blue.
So, what should we take away from the decline of the once booming frozen yogurt industry? Well, first of all, don't get into a market that's oversaturated. That's why a lot of people lose money in multi-level marketing, because by the time you buy in, your market might already be saturated. Some people say YouTube is oversaturated. I don't know. One article about froyo from 2015 said customer demand is still strong and the category has some room to grow, but I think it's all about the best operators, those who bring something special to the experience. They were wrong about the demand and the room to grow, but they were right about the rest of it. I think you either have to get in early or do it better. either. Like, don't just do it because everyone else is doing it. That's true for business, that's true for YouTube. Either way, they say that those who don't learn from the past are doomed to repeat it. And to be honest, that kind of feels like a lesson for the smoke shops of 2024. Speaking of repeating the past, there are some people who are convinced that frozen yogurt is going to make a comeback. By the end of 2023, the top 10 froyo chains increased in number by about 50 locations, which is the first time in a long time that number has increased instead of decreased. So I guess we'll see. Let me know in the comments what you remember about the frozen yogurt boom of the early 2010s. Like, what places did you have near you? What did you put in your bowl? And I know this episode was a little different from my other stuff, so thanks for sticking around. And most importantly, just remember that even when it doesn't feel like it, it's gonna be okay. I'll see you soon.
Sky